A new Gallup poll shows Americans' trust in the media remains at near record lows. But another nationwide scientific poll, which OVIS conducted, shows that there is hope for the news media.
You're listening to the OVIS-IT podcast with Tracy Grant.
Welcome, everyone, to the OVIS-IT podcast. I'm Tracy Grant, the chief correspondent for OVIS, the only online community that combines the best of cryptocurrency with social media and rewards people for telling the truth. A September Gallup poll shows that only 34% of Americans have either a great deal or fair amount of trust in the mass media to fully, accurately, and fairly report the news. According to Gallup, this number is essentially unchanged from last year. Joining me now is OVIS founder Linton Johnson. He spent 30 years as both a journalist and a communications executive. Linton, do these numbers surprise you?
No, Tracy, these numbers do not surprise me. In fact, they almost track exactly with the nationwide poll that we at OVIS conducted about a year ago. Let's take a deep dive into Gallup's 34% number. It's a combination of two groups of people. Those who have either a great deal of trust in the media and those who have a fair amount of trust. Now, if you look at that great deal of trust, only 7% say they have a great deal of trust, and the remaining 27% say they just have a fair amount of trust in the news media. Now, what's interesting about that 7% number is that it's virtually identical to the results of our nationwide OVIS poll about truth in media, which we did last year. We asked the question, how truthful is the news media? And only 8% said the media is very truthful. So very similar to that 7% number from Gallup. So if that's the case, then it also means that 92% of Americans that we surveyed have some level of distrust in the news media. That is not very good, if you ask me, Tracy.
No, it really isn't. I remember the poll we did last year, and although I realized that the numbers were going to be quite high, it blew me away. And the fact that it's virtually the same in this Gallup poll just shows that nothing's getting any better.
Yeah, nothing's getting any better. And we also did a good scientific poll, that's for sure, I suppose. But that's all spells bad news for the news media. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that a well-functioning democracy requires a trusted news media. And, you know, right now, the news media isn't trusted.
No, not at all. Not at all. And basically, that's what we're here for. Linton, at OVIS, our mission is to incentivize truth-telling. I think most news outlets are trying to tell the truth. Why don't Americans trust the media?
Ratings and clicks business model. The ratings and clicks business model, I think, is what's destroying the news media. People are chasing after ratings and clicks. They're not chasing after the truth, which is why we're trying to incentivize the one thing that we're all after, and that is truth telling. So, you know, when you have different outlets that are just out for the biggest number of clicks or the greatest ratings, they're going to do whatever they can to drive up those numbers. And sometimes that means not telling the whole truth, or sometimes that means telling outright lies. Most of the time, I think, is just not telling the whole truth. They're trying to pander to a particular audience. And while the information that they give may be true, is not the whole truth. It's like listening in a courtroom to just one side of the argument, which may very well be factually accurate, but it's not telling the entire story. It's not particularly honest, if you would say. So I think that's one of the big reasons that people aren't trusting the news, because they're like, well, I do want to hear all sides of the story, but I'm only getting one side from this news outlet, and I don't have a lot of time to be going to all the different news outlets trying to get all various viewpoints. I wish somebody would just give me all sides of the story, and that all sides were factually accurate so I can make up my own opinion.
Mm-hmm. I mean, basically, what we've seen is the networks and the newspapers are constantly going, look at me, watch me, and doing almost anything to get that to happen. Look over here. And when you're doing that, sometimes from what we've seen, people sort of don't necessarily hold truth as the most important part of that scenario.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly right. I mean it's maybe like I said, it's true, but not completely accurate. You're not getting the whole picture on things, and people are tired of that. I mean, it was very clear in our polling that people want, even despite their political beliefs, they want to hear all sides. They want to be able to make up their own mind. They're tired of being told what to think, and they want to be able to make their own decision. And they're tired of pundits and what they call the media elite telling them how they should think. And I think that's regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on, or somewhere in between, people want to be able to think for themselves, but they do want all the facts, and they want an honest news media to provide them with the facts. But this ratings model, this business model rather, of ratings and clicks doesn't lend itself to providing all the facts. And I think the pendulum swung this way, where the news media can get away with getting higher clicks and ratings, by telling a half truth. But now it's coming back where people are just sick and tired of it. And so I think this is the time when people are they're just abandoning, traditional news media and trying to find something different. And Ovis is trying to be that place where you get all sides of the story, and they're all factually accurate. And this is where you can find the truth, the real truth, because you have all sides of the story.
Right. Well, what are some examples of how ratings and clicks and that whole business model have eroded people's trust in news?
I think some examples are, there's Fox News on one end, and then there's MSNBC on the other. Fox News rarely interviews a Democrat. And if they do, it's one that agrees with their political slant. And MSNBC, same thing. I mean, I've watched them both, and it's like a unicorn if I see a Republican on MSNBC that's being interviewed. I know they do. Each side does have hosts that are either, they claim to be, conservatives or liberals. But that's about the extent that you get. But in a normal news story, it's very rare that either network, at least in my experience, has shown that they are willing to see the other side and go interview the other side. And I think at that point, it becomes such a partisan slant that the opposite side of the aisle doesn't even want to interview, because they don't feel like they're going to get fair treatment with the news media outlet that's on the opposite side of their aisle, right? So what's interesting is we did a podcast on Chris Licht, who's the new head of CNN, and there was a scandal because Chris Licht dared to talk to Republicans, God forbid. The Republicans were saying, I'm not even sure I trust you, Chris. I know you're new, but the way CNN's been treating us in the past, I'm not sure we're ever going to get a fair shake. And so he's trying to assure them that they will get a fair shake. But I mean, the damage has been done. And when the damage is done, it's like, how do you repair that damage? It takes a long time. So Ovis is an opportunity where we get off on the right foot, we stay on the right foot, and we incentivize truth telling, and we give facts on all sides of the story so people can come to see the truth.
Well, with such huge distrust of news media, will Americans ever have faith in the Fourth Estate? Coming up on the OVIS-IT podcast, our nationwide poll shows there's hope on the horizon. We'll be right back.
Join the movement. Be part of a global community that's ready to end fake news by incentivizing the truth. It's simple. All you have to do is go to ovisnews.com and follow us on social with a few clicks.
Truth. Once an objective measure is now just another partisan battleground. Welcome back to the OVIS-IT podcast. I'm OVIS Chief Correspondent Tracy Grant. Today's topic, Americans' distrust in the news. A September 2022 Gallup poll shows that only 7% of Americans have a great deal of trust in the news media. Those results are similar to our nationwide OVIS poll, which we conducted in August of 2021. Now, that poll showed 78% of respondents believe the media told the truth. Linton, you and I are longtime journalists. We believe that a trusted news media is essential to a well-functioning democracy. These results are disheartening. Is there any hope?
Yeah, there is hope, which is good. Fortunately, there is hope, Tracy. Gallup has been doing these trusted news polls for the last 50 years, since 1972. And early in the podcast, we discussed the impact of the ratings and clicks business model. And that's how we've ended up with this fake news misinformation scenario in news these days. In those 50 years, Gallup, though, never asked the question about people's feelings towards fake news and misinformation. And while it may seem obvious, we still wanted to ask in our nationwide survey. So we asked 2 questions about that topic in our own polling, and I think you'll find a lot of hope there. Our first question on a scale of 1 to 10 was, how important is it that the news give you the truth regardless of your political beliefs? Now, 1 meant unimportant and 10 meant very important. So we decided just to look at those who responded with an 8 or above. And when we did the math, 72% of respondents say truth in news matters. That's a good number. But let's take a look at another question we asked. It was, would it be possible to ever eradicate fake news? 60% of respondents said either, maybe, or yes. So 60% said maybe or yes. That's nearly 2/3 of Americans. That's really good news. 2/3 of Americans believe that we can definitely end fake news, which, is a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, I guess that does mean there's hope on the horizon. But the question is, how do we do it? How will OVIS bring that hope?
Well, that's also a great question. What we decided to do is, when we were doing this polling, is ask people different methods. It was very clear in our polling that ratings and clicks is not the answer. That business model is out. People want to get their power back. So we asked a number of other questions, which you can find at OVIS-IT. We put most of the survey results there. And so you can read more about that. But really what it boiled down to is people want their power back. They're tired of centralized control over the media. They want to be able to make decisions about what stories are on the news. They're tired of the blood and guts type stories. They want stories that are more substantial to their lives. And they're not always interested in stories that have great ratings appeal. So, those are really important to them. And our business model, where we incentivize truth telling, allows for us to basically crowdfund stories that may not have huge ratings appeal, but still allow journalists to be paid a fair wage, and stories that are fact checked. So I'd encourage everyone to join the movement at OVIS-IT and get involved and really understand how this works. But what we do is we give power back to the people. We allow for you, the human, to be able to take control of the news. Let you guys have control of the news instead of the news controlling you. It's basically our model. We're trying to incentivize the truth.
That does it for us on the OVIS-IT podcast. If you want to find the full OVIS national poll results, visit our website at OVIS-news.com. It's also where you can join the movement to end fake news by incentivizing the truth. I'm Tracy Grant. Thanks for watching.